In this episode, we're going to be talking about some seizures at the border. We're going to be talking about the government's plan on how they're targeting many of the purveyors of these things. All that and more. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name's Sterling. I'm your host. For all of their tough talk and all of their fear mongering, the Liberal Party is absolutely going to do anything that Donald Trump requests of them. And one of those examples is they're listing 7 criminal organizations, as the article calls them, in the terrorist organization group. I'll explain to you why that is relevant and why that matters, especially to the United States. Canada lists 7 criminal organizations as terrorist entities, the minister says. Canada has listed 7 transcontinental criminal organizations as terrorist entities, the public minister said. The list of terrorist entities includes, and they list 7, or I guess they're all from Central America by the spelling of their names. These listed entities are organized crime groups that spread fear in local populations by using methods of extreme violence and are known for drug trafficking, human trafficking, and trafficking of illegal guns, Minister David McGuinty told reporters in Ottawa. Now, this is interesting. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said on Thursday, following the U.S. terror listing, that she will propose a constitutional reform aimed at further protecting Mexico's national sovereignty. It is significant to note that the Mexican president is talking about reforming her constitution to strengthen the sovereignty of her land. Is that because of the criminal organizations, or is that because the Americans want to operate freely in Mexico to get at these quote-unquote terrorists? By labeling them terrorist organizations, the American government has a much freer hand in how they resolve the issue. I will take the example of many Middle Eastern or North African terrorist organizations where the Americans will just randomly drop a drone bomb on a group. Well, not randomly to them, I suppose, but to the people on the ground. They're getting together to have one of their regional meetings, and all of a sudden a bomb drops down and, takes out the leader. Will they do that in Mexico? I doubt it. But they absolutely are prepared to send in a whole group of tier 1 operators. And those guys are not a joke. Like, I get that Hollywood makes them, out to be all of these things that are kind of approachable and whatnot. But these are serious people. And they might not be serious when they're in the house, but when they're in the field, they are absolutely dangerous. And they will cut through these guys like they're like nothing. There's just no amount of training. You don't just, get picked out of boot camp to be one of these tier 1 operators. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of determination. And it's a mental fortitude and a weapons proficiency that very few people possess. Now, do the Mexican government want, 3 teams of Deltas running through the northern part or the eastern part of Mexico, cutting people to ribbons? Maybe, maybe not. Do the American government want the scourge of narcotics stopped? Absolutely. I mean, the volume of money is really what it boils down to. So if they can stop the supply reaching the people, then the money will stop reaching the suppliers, and it becomes a law of diminishing returns. So it's a significant distinction from the American point of view. And will that mean that the Americans can slip 10 guys in across the Canadian border and have them all vanish like some sort of Delta Force TV show? I don't know, maybe. Would it bother you to think that they have taken out operators on the Canadian soil and did for us that what our government, our liberal government, seems incapable of doing? I don't think that anybody who traffics with some of the things that we're talking about deserves necessarily the protection of a society that is trying to do the best thing for them, because they exploit it then, right? They're not also not trying to do the best thing for that society. They're actually trying to exploit what they will call their softness or their weakness. So by having now everybody from Mexico to Nunavik call these cartel criminal organizations as terrorists, the United States opens up a whole host of weapons and tools at their disposal, right? I mean, in theory, I guess they could get a hold of some of these criminal organization people and take them to Guantanamo, in truth, right? And not break any rules. So the distinction is important. I don't know that necessarily the Canadian government understands that, but they absolutely, the American government absolutely does, and that's why they requested that Canada do that. And of course, no matter how tough the Liberals are talking, they realize that without their decisions, the Liberal decisions have brought the country to the point where, without the United States, we are going to go through 2 or 3 years of economic upheaval that will make it difficult for any government to survive, if I'm completely honest with you. Now, I am not certain if this bodes good or bad for the Liberal government, but the Niagara Regional Police seized 1,000 grams, and they did so in the Niagara region in Hamilton, which is not that far from the border or from Toronto, depending on which direction that you travel. What I find interesting is that the investigation revealed that men living in Hamilton were traveling to the Niagara region to peddle these things, and that amount was also seized with other inebriants. But the amount that they seized, the 1,000 grams, which for those of you that don't speak metric, that's just over 2 pounds, is 110 grand on the street value. Now, everybody who understands that culture knows that the police sort of elevate those prices, but it's easily 75 grand. Based, if the police say it's 110 grand, it's probably close to 75. And that's just two guys in an area that were traveling back and forth. And you have to ask yourself, if you're traveling to the Niagara region, which is one of the busiest border crossings between Canada and the United States for volume of freight, meaning that there is an established ports of entry. So making it, quite easy probably to get it across, or to come, in either direction. So was this a discovery because of the Donald Trump and the Republican Party demanding that there be more security? Was this something that the Niagara police stumbled upon? Was it, due to, like right out of television, a whole bunch of investigators and, undercover buys and all the things that go along with that? The article doesn't really say. I just think that the headline says a lot, though, because the Canadian government is trying to make it seem like this is not a problem, that Canada is not acting like a conduit for any of these criminal organizations, and that everything passing through the Canadian border is not a big deal, and that the Americans are overreacting. That's the story that they're trying to tell to the Canadian on the ground. But if this was in your neighborhood, would you call anything that the Americans are saying an overreaction, or would you be saying, yes, let's do something about it? And that's important, because I don't want people to be swayed away from the issues of Canada, right? We have things in Canada that we need to be worried about. And right now, all I can hear the corporation media is talking about is this border issue. So we're talking about it so that we can sort of navigate between the BS of the one side and the reality of it. Now, to drive home my point that they are feeding us a lot of BS, and that the corporate media, the Liberal government, and anyone else on the far left that is preaching that somehow Donald Trump is the problem, I will take us to the housing minister. Now, we have had a housing crisis in this country for years, all brought on by the policies of the far left and the Liberal government, all brought on by them bringing in 2 million people in one calendar year, having no place to put them, no jobs to give them, hoping that we can just run the government into debt by giving out, renting full hotels to house them in, and giving them daily allowances to live on rather than try to find them jobs. The housing minister, Nate Smith, says that one of the problems with the tariffs from Donald Trump is that Canada is going to have to put retaliatory tariffs onto the products that are coming in from the United States. Now, that's important, because one of the things that they want to put retaliatory tariffs on is some of the finishing products that will go into houses and homes. So they can't afford to build it. And if they can afford to build it, it's going to cost a lot more money. They're going to have to pass that rate on to the consumer. One of their megalithic building guy says the home developer organization in Canada, because the Liberal government is not trying to find individual home builders who are maybe building one or two. They want to find only the biggest corporations. Now, the article goes on to say that MP Smith went on the CBC podcast called The House, and he was talking about how the Home Building Association president of Canada has decided that because these retaliatory tariffs are going to be put on to the finishing products that go into houses, he can't give those costs to the shareholder. He has to pass that rate on to anybody that might want to be buying it in a country that has the most expensive housing on earth, rather than not put the tariffs on so that you don't act like a spiteful little child, right? Rather than say to yourself, wait a minute, we can't put tariffs on those things because that will harm our people. That will harm the people that we have claimed that we are worried about. No, they don't want to do that. They just want to say to you, oh no, it's not our fault that we can't get any houses built. It's not our fault that they're super overpriced. It's not our fault that, you can't afford a one-bedroom apartment on your own because you need to be making nearly $150,000 a year just to rent one. No, that's not our fault, even though that is exactly the problems that the Liberal government has brought onto this country, even though that is exactly the things that they have done. Now they want to try and shift the blame onto Donald Trump, because by adding tariffs to something that Donald Trump is doing because he wants to bring industry back to his country. Now, the problem, of course, is the Marxist approach of the Liberal government, right? I mean, how can you even call them liberals when they're so bent on these far left policies? I mean, call me crazy, but the word liberal should come from the word liberty, where you have freedom and liberty, right? Not, oh, we'll do it our way. You got Mark Carney talking about how he's going to take tax dollars, give it to home builders, and then those home builders are going to make... So he wants to take your tax dollars and give it to people that are going to build homes, but only corporations, not small guys, not little guys. Just the big people that he can control, that he has on his phone, that he knows, that are in bed, right? So it's like when if you're out there and you're listening to me and you come from another country, when you were in that country saying to yourself, geez, I wish I could get to North America, then I would at least have an opportunity to do something other than what this government has decided that I will do and that my whole family will do forever and ever and ever. When you said I just want an opportunity to do, well, Mark Carney wants to duplicate what was going on in your country and bring it into his, where only a very few select people get to do anything and the rest of us have to just, own nothing and be happy. So when you ran away from that country, when you did all of those things that you needed to do to escape that, were you happy? Were you owned nothing? And what we're talking about is that we're talking about the Liberal government deciding that only a very few people can build homes in this country, and that they're going to take tax dollars and give it to these people, to the bank, and the bank will give them the money, they'll buy the supplies, and then they'll turn around and demand that you pay exorbitant amounts of money because there is a short supply and because all of the stuff that went into it was put in there at a tariffed rate, rather than just not put a tariff on the device, rather than just say to themselves, we'll let anybody build it, like they would from the Canadian or from the conservative side, rather than the Liberal government say, hey, wait a minute, rather than worried about making corporations that'll build houses to our spec and put them in high density, why don't we just support a couple of companies that want to make faucets? Because that's one of the things that the article mentions, that there's no faucets being made in Canada, though we have all of the raw material for it. We don't seem to be manufacturing them here. And I would imagine one of the reasons that we're not manufacturing them here is because that gives more control to the federal government, that they can just take the raw material, sell it to the United States and make a profit, and then those jobs don't ever have to come into Canada. But it seems to me that the solution would be to manufacture it inside of Canada. That doesn't seem to be occurring to the housing minister. He's trying to scare you into saying that because Donald Trump is putting a tariff on Canadian steel, then they have to put a tariff on anything that's coming back into the country, including all of the things that might make building a house both quick and affordable. I mean, the logic there just escapes me. I don't understand why in your head you don't just say to yourself, well, the best thing to do for my people is to ignore this, let this come through not only at a tariff, we should be subsidizing this. Let's bring this in cheaper because we got to get these houses built. Unfortunately, they don't want you to be thinking that there's a solution at the end of the tunnel that they can't provide for you. And then they have to create the problem so that you will stop looking at the fact that housing has always been expensive, no matter what Trump said. that it's always been in short supply for years, no matter what Trump said or did. Trump wasn't even in power and all of these problems were happening. So why all of a sudden do you think to yourself, after 3 weeks of Trump being in power, or a month or whatever it is now, that somehow in your mind that all of these problems are now the responsibility of Donald Trump? And if you want to believe that for some reason all of these problems are the responsibility of Donald Trump, then you are probably going to cast your vote in a very bad way. But if you were to take a deep breath and understand that all of these problems that the liberal government keeps trying to scare you with existed before Donald Trump took office in January, that they were existent long before Mark Carney decided that he wanted to be the prime minister so he could put it on his resume, just like a friend of his from Italy. If you were to take a minute and look at all of that and realize that there is nothing that has changed except for now they have some boogeyman to scare you with in the name of Donald Trump, then you would realize that really what they're trying to do is not look out for your best interest in any way, shape, or form, that they're trying to just manipulate you into voting for them because the corporate media wants you to believe that the one billionaire is going to be able to talk to the other billionaire. But the truth of the matter is that the one billionaire is a hard charger and the other billionaire is a delicate flower with sparkly socks. So I'm not sure that he's going to have the fortitude that he claims. And I have listened to his economic policies, and I have listened to his, public money is going to catalyze many multiples, which I know exactly what that means. That means he's going to give them tax dollars and hope that when you buy the house on the other end, those tax dollars are somehow going to trickle down. They're not going to trickle down. They're going to go right into the pocket of a very select few. And before you know it, we will all be living in these monolithic 75-story 350 unit concrete masses that you see in Asia or Eastern Europe or any of a dozen countries that we could list that are all have one thing in common. They all have people in them that wish they were living in the free world. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.